can make them tenable. Like, some houses have come very close to the major roads. Those few houses, if they are relocated, it becomes tenable. How technology helps in the slum mapping. That was the first issue. And the boundary of the slum, basically that needs to be updated on the day of survey or on the date decided by the state government. Basically, we leave it to the state governments to decide on the date which would decide on the boundary of the particular slum. This particular boundary should be considered flexible in the long run, so that we really achieve our goal of slum-free city planning. And the onus of fixing the size of the population for non-tenable slums should be on the community. And we have said that we are basically stressing on the community involvement, so that the community is also involved in the process of deciding whether a particular slum would be tenable or non-tenable, because the parameters keep changing. And the last one is the settlement morphology available for infrastructure needs to be mapped to enable decision making or redevelopment for in situ rehabilitation. So basically we are saying that a particular slum needs to be mapped, so that we map it so as to link it with the existing city infrastructure. The verification has to be done at the community level, so that we are on a solid footing and there is no hiccups in future regarding the people who have been covered under the survey. In Chhattisgarh, for example, there are state acts which impede the implementation of Rajiv Awas Yojana. So we have come up with specific legislative amendments which would be required so that the mandatory reform process initiated by Rajiv Awas Yojana can be implemented, and for that an agreement could be signed or an agreement could be entered into with the respective state government, so that the central act overrides the existing impediments in the state act. Mapping of the non-residential activities is also very, very important. When we are mapping a particular slum, we are also mapping the surrounding areas, so that we know how they can be integrated with the existing city infrastructure. Wherever land belongs to the state government, it's not an issue, because the state government has to part away with the land, so that we go for a relocation of the existing slums. But there are issues where the land belongs to the central government, like the railways or the defense or the national highways or the airport authorities. So for those lands, there has to be a time frame. Otherwise, the debate would be endless, and the land transfer, cannot take place. The community has to be involved. There are community-based organizations in every slum, like neighborhood groups, neighborhood committees. So these neighborhood groups and committees have to be strengthened, and they have to be trained in the local language. The community-based organizations will do the social auditing for us. Community savings has contributed or helped people to, helped beneficiaries to come up with the 10% beneficiary contribution. So similar such beneficiary contribution will also form a part of the Rajiv Awas Yojana. So community savings has to be also mobilized. Just relocating the population elsewhere will not help out, because they need to be, because in any case they will be relocated from their livelihood support mechanisms. So the livelihood support mechanisms have also to be strengthened, and the community have to be involved when the relocation takes place. We have suggested that today DRI loan, differential rate of interest loan, is maximum to the tune of 15,000. It will be of not much help. So when the houses will cost around 2 lakh or 2 lakh 20,000, so the DRI loan has to be increased. So at the Government of India level, we are also suggesting that the 15,000, the cap has to go up at least to 50,000 with the same rate of interest. We could tap such corporate houses, both in the public and private sector, so that they contribute to such financing. And we have also mentioned that services have to be individualized for user charges in the slums. In fact, we are contemplating G+3 constructions. So somebody staying in the ground floor, somebody staying in the top floor, everybody has to share the whole burden. Many of the cities are struggling for the right kind of NGOs who can take up IC activities, who can take up survey, who can take up mapping, all these kind of things. So NGOs have to be empaneled, and so that it will be easier for the state governments to implement Rajiv Awas Yojana.
Motivated by the NGOs or I think.
Can I put it this way? That there is skepticism on the part of the people.
We realize that we require participation in 4 forms. One is political, second is executional, third is grassroots level, and fourth is from the corporate world. We need to undertake awareness building campaigns. There needs to be a communication participation law. There has to be a GR in that sense.
The participation also includes the nature of participation, which includes, for example, design. I mean, who designs, how is it designed? Whether we are talking about participation right from the beginning of the whole project, or as very often happens, as a mere consultation at the end of the on the day before sending the DPR.
Use of mass media and technology to encourage participation. Our whole group felt that the baseline maps, the pedestrian maps, those can be done with community participation, and subsequently, if interface is required, you can interface with technocrats.
GIS is the best way for a community to understand what they are doing. All this go beyond a scale of a household, and to understand that you require tools which can make it understandable. GIS can actually make people as a community understand their own problems better. In order for the participatory aspect of the GIS, it is important that it is understood that it is a cognitive tool of the community.
If you have to involve beneficiaries to participate, you need to make all your meetings, all your discussions very effective. It should be time-saving and output-oriented. So social audit is also an important tool for encouraging participation. There is a lot of disconnect in the DPR about participation. I think the ULBs and those who are the implementers need to pay more attention to the toolkits that have been outlaid.
Whole process of tendering is very inimical to participation, because participation of NGOs is not factored in properly, and therefore that needs to be factored in more specifically as to how it should not be a process of eliminating NGOs, but rather incorporating them.
The participation is not alone involved in initiating the program, but it's also in monitoring, understanding design options, in construction, and in also determining layouts.
The whole spirit of RAY is very often not reaching the people, and that cannot only happen by some announcements. There has to be a good amount of human resource which is really aware of the whole spirit of the participation, which includes technical qualified community architects.
We also felt that there were a lot of rigid norms with regard to the design of the units. In case of delays in the execution of the program, those extra costs need to be taken cognizance of by the authorities concerned. There is a lapse in the funding, in detailing about the funding mechanisms for these projects. There is a possibility of giving loans on incremental basis. Also for multiple uses, because if that person wants to use it for, say, rental housing, he could use it for that. If he wants to use it for doing up his own place in a better way, he could use it for that.
Delay, not because of the community or the NGO, but because of the administrative processes. I mean, those kind of cases, the cost escalation because of the delay should not be paid for by the community, but it should be compensated for.
The slum-free city cell needs to be represented by civil society as well as NGOs, which is lacking in the present guidelines. The ministry should explore funding options and linking it with community savings. There is already a EWS earmarking, and there is a provision for SC and ST earmarking, which may lapse or which is about to lapse. This should not be allowed to lapse, and whatever funds are generated for that should be used as a part of the rotating fund. There is also relevance of high technology for slum mapping, only when necessary, otherwise one should bank on community processes, community help. There is also a need for prioritization and time limitation for any program.
Lot of financing of the whole array project has been left in a way without details. 50% of the money is to come from the various state and municipal sources, and there is no clarity on this. Linking to savings has to be an important part of the array scheme. That is that we should have a platform available in the form of software, infrastructure, and web-based platform, wherein all the various different efforts could be put together, both in terms of technology as well as other knowledge resources, including all the trainings required, awareness campaigns required, and such other material. There should be a common platform which should be funded by this particular project. Should be based on free and open source software, which therefore should not mean any continuous expenses. And ULBs must mandate that all their data should be available in the formats that are open standards, so that they can be used.
We also toyed with the idea of the relevance of 260 square feet for everybody. What is its purpose? Whether one can tweak with it, increase it, decrease it, but we didn't have much time to discuss that. We also touched upon employee housing, whether employers are willing to contribute to the housing fund. Because right now the financial mechanisms are not in place, but again there was lack of time. So these two aspects we just touched, we didn't discuss much about it.
Just one point I'd like to add, that we had a very brief discussion in our group on the funding gap between 50% that's coming from the state and ways in which it would be difficult to make that up. Some richer states may be able to contribute, some cities, especially the smaller ones, would find it very difficult. But potentially the importance of community savings linked to community funds at the city level, and potentially the 25% earmarking of the city money going in, some more part of that, to support the development and contribute to that community fund.
And that's 2006. What? The satellite images are from 2006.
Okay,
I'll begin with slum mapping with community. The group felt that there is lack of standardization in terms of how to carry out slum mapping along with community. There are different ways in which it is being done by different agencies, and the outputs are different, the indicators are different, so there needs to be some kind of convergence on this. The group also felt that the RAY guidelines are heavily biased towards technology, and it is not very easy to understand by the layperson. There is synergetic action which is required by implementing agencies and data produced by stakeholders and community organizations. In the progressive states where people have, there is a history of participation, it is not as challenging. But in states which are in transition, which are really caught up with the idea that yes, it needs to be participated, how does one go about incentivizing the community to participate? A lot of cities which are expanding, and the area limits and new areas have come about in the periphery, and a lot of non-notified slums are there. How does one take these into account while mapping, and how can they be mainstreamed into the mapping process? There are a lot of slums which are under private landowners, government landowners, under various landowning agencies. How can they all be amalgamated into the mapping process? The community has really not much idea on what RAY is, and then when we go to mapping, again there is not much idea of what is it that RAY, how new is RAY with respect to the previous programs. Then RAY guideline mentions about the process of tendering, and there is a lot of focus on the least cost tenders. But a lot of times there are agencies which deliver a lot of quality, and when the least cost is taken, the quality aspects gets undermined. So the group wanted to explore whether quality cost-based tendering is possible under RAY.
The mapping, whether it is done by the community or expert, etc., it should be revalidated by the authorities. And more than that, this should be on the website so that anybody who has objection or suggestions, they can do it. And this is usually not done. Because in Pune there are 4 or 5 NGOs, everybody is doing GIS, everybody is doing slum mapping, nobody knows what others are doing. This is amongst the NGOs. As far as the government is concerned, they don't know what we are doing. And all the things which the NGO is doing with their efforts is not validated. Then this is very, very, very important thing to happen.
There are members of the group who discussed about some cost-effective and open-source solutions which are already available. For example, there's a mobile and there's a PDA system. It's a handheld device which can do the basic mapping. Like it is even more cost-effective than a GPS. So there are options and alternatives available. So instead of reinventing the wheel, these options can be sort of listed out in the rate guidelines, and the advantages, disadvantages, the costing part of this can be broadly brought out in the guidelines. So the database needs to be dynamic so that these details can be fed in. And with short training sessions with the community, it is possible. There are states which have already used some expensive softwares. Whether that can be shared with other states and cities through some kind of rentals in software so that everybody can, in lesser amount of time and in a cost-effective manner, make maximum utilization of what is available already. Involvement of locals, like local plumber, local ward level engineer in the entire mapping process is very crucial, and that has to be clearly brought out in the guidelines. There should be some kind of funding available for acquiring data and using the data. How can all this be linked with the development plan and development rules and regulations? Funding for documenting the entire process, not an assessment, but how negotiations happen right from design to implementation to post-occupation. The entire thing, if it is documented in terms of what worked and what did not work and why, that we felt some funding needs to be provided for this.
There are many cities, particularly smaller ones, which has not effective NGOs, and that under RAY this should be supported. And instead of a big NGO spreading its tentacles in other cities, the group felt that local initiative should be encouraged, and the bigger NGO in a bigger city who has the experience should help them, and the RAY should support it financially. Thank you.
Issue of acquiring land for slums, for rehabilitating them, and that the state, if it was not having enough funds, the center should help in finance for acquisition of land also, and also the economically weaker section earmarking of funds and the SC/ST sub-plan funds could be used for acquiring land to accommodate the new projects.
Thank you.
The RAY is the first program or the schemes which is implemented the citywide, talking about the citywide. So till date there are lots of state level schemes, the ULB level schemes are working for the different pockets, and the central scheme is for the different pockets. But now we are talking about the citywide slum strategy. So there is a need to conversion of all the schemes and the funding patterns is to rotate through the RAY. Right now what is happening, it is just written in this state there are 4 number of schemes that approximate cost is this and its utilization is this, but there is no contextual information is available. Okay, in which scheme what kind of initiative has been taken. For example, in Gujarat there is all the city has a new housing project, but if you want to make them understand that other state and cities are also doing the in situ upgradation low cost solution, but there is no data is available at the upfront from the ministry that different scheme. So there is no cross learning from the state to state and the city.
So the suggestion is very concrete that there should be a clear mandate from the Government of India that banks should be directly involved with subsidized rate of interest for the financing.
But what I fail to understand that the Government of India has rolled out this RAY without having any consultation process in the first place. You know, how come the whole country is following certain things without a consultation process being initiated in all the states with all the stakeholders, and they're just bulldozing into this kind of a thing, and then now we are trying to dissect and see what is right, what is wrong.
Summary of the key issues. We see that there are a large number in this whole cluster of slum mapping and community participation, and all very relevant. One is with respect to the slum boundary, then the decision on tenable and non-tenable slums, and this must get reflected through the mapping process. And then mapping of the settlement morphology, that is how the settlement is, in order to see whether it can be upgraded or it needs to be rehabilitated. And then also this whole business of enumeration, ground truthing, and verification, in which the communities have to be involved in the mapping process. What was also mentioned is that also the non-residential activities should also be mapped in order to learn about the livelihood activities which are happening in the settlement. And then the surrounding facilities and infrastructure, in order to create linkages and ensure that some people actually get facilities like health, education, etc. What was also suggested is that we can use different technologies for mapping, like at the micro level, can use some kind of approaches with which communities can work at a comfortable level. Also, the technologies which are introduced to communities at that level should be in the local language, and there has to be enough of capacity building for people to be able to handle those technologies. At a wider city level, where you're talking about establishing externalities to settlement, then you can go in for definitely for a more expensive than GIS platform technology. So our group mentioned that there should be 4 types of participation, which included political, grassroots, even corporate participation, and to institutionalize participation of community. Now, who should be involved in the whole participatory process? In the smaller cities where there are NGOs who are capable of supporting communities, the local NGOs which are there, the smaller ones could be, their capacity could be built and supported by the NGOs already with the experience. And there was also talk of building up community capacity through just training and also bringing out a manual for which is understandable by communities to do this process. In this regard, the RAY guidelines were also mentioned, and the manuals, that they are biased towards technologies and difficult to understand. They should be simplified so that they can be understood more easily. Talk about open source software and accessibility of data and exchange of information and data was also seen as important. The inclusion, when we're talking about civil society organization, also the representation of NGOs and CBOs on this slum-free city itself was mentioned. And the specific ways in which communities can participate should be more strongly built into the RAY guidelines themselves. In terms of financing, I think all 3 groups mentioned very strongly that promoting community savings should be an important strategy in order that people can meet housing costs and other costs. And it was mentioned about the differential rate of interest loans, DRI, which should be increased to facilitate housing. Then the corporate social responsibility funding can be thought of being brought into the whole kitty of rate funding. Provision of individual services so that the user's charges can be levied. And another very important thing, if there are delays in construction due to no fault of the community, then it should not be loaded onto the additional cost should not be loaded onto the community. If we are talking about GIS and also bringing in data from different sources, the cost of data acquisition, so that the data doesn't have to be stolen from somewhere and brought in and through other informal means, should be built into the program. It's important to document the process of community involvement, of building, etc. Not as something which happens concurrently as learning, empanelment of NGOs at national, state and local level based on a criteria for supporting groups.